Hi everyone. Hope everyone can hear me and see the PowerPoint slide. Welcome to Softree's webinar today on cross-section templates and template components. My name is Andy Moon, your host, and we have here today with us our training manager Matthew Dickey, who's going to be presenting the webinar. I just want to say we're all going through some difficult times right now, wherever you are in the world. So our team at Softree really wishes you to stay safe and healthy throughout this pandemic. Okay, so just gonna do a quick webinar housekeeping, run through the webinar housekeeping items here. You are muted, but please feel free to ask questions and engage with us through the Q&A section of the GoToWebinar panel that you see. And this webinar is being recorded, so it'll be available on our YouTube channel as usual. And everyone who registered for the webinar will be receiving an automated email notification, including the link to the video recording of the webinar. Okay, so what are we expecting today for today's agenda? Well, you're going to be seeing Matt playing around with some template file structure. He's going to also show you how to do some template structure, adjusting component parameters, how to process sequence of template processing, surfaces and point codes, adding components and bridge templates, assigning parameters by range, and he's likely going to finish off by adding point codes, showing you how to add point codes on other views. And without further ado, I will now pass over my control to Matt.
Thanks everyone for attending, and thanks for the introduction, Andy. So yeah, we're going to cover templates. We'll do a quick introduction on kind of what they are, how they behave, how to check the way they're behaving. Then we'll look at customizing an existing template using component parameters, and then we'll build a new template from scratch using template components. Then we'll jump out of the template editor and play around with things like parameter overrides, taper template, and the bridge template. So with that, we'll kind of describe how things behave. So the software, it's 3D software. We have our alignment, and the alignment can be adjusted. The 3D alignment can be adjusted in the plan view for the horizontal alignment. Moving that around, that's going to update our section view, our profile view. Firstly, we can adjust the vertical alignment in the profile view, and it's all attached. That being said, though, that's just considering the line or the road as a line. What drives the geometry of the considering the road as a 3D object or surface is the way the cross-section looks, behaves, and the geometry associated with that. So we can see all that in the section view here. And we can edit how that behaves by going into the templates editor. So right now I've got my 3 default templates pop up when a user first installs the software. And those are default. So this example is set for the civil version of our software, where the rural template is the default template. And then there'll also be an urban template and a resource low volume road template. If you have the forestry version of the software, the resource low volume road will be set as the default template. So without getting into how these are built yet, we'll just look at how we can check the way they're behaving. So in the section view back here, that's attached to the alignment, but once we're in the template editor, we can move things around and see the way they're behaving without affecting the alignment in our design. So this one, I can select, I want to look at the rural template that I have. I can move that around. I can switch and check another template. I can also see how my volumes are being calculated. So the software is using an average end area calculation to figure out the volumes associated with your surfacing layers, with your subgrade excavation and fill, etc. So we can view what's being counted as what by right-clicking in the different areas and toggling what's hatched and what's not. So I can turn on the hatch for subgrade, SG, and see, okay, that's being counted as subgrade fill. I can pull it down. I can hatch subgrade cut area, pull it up. I can also see what layers are associated with what section in the template. So that's surface layer 1, surface layer 2, and surface layer 3. We can also check the alignment at different stations, so we can cycle through our road alignment by clicking through report points using the arrows here. If we'd like, we can hit this flag button and jump to a specific station, station 100, see what the road looks like there. Or we can check the template in a typical scenario. So this one, typical slope right, typical slope left, typical cut, and typical fill. If you want to look at a bunch all at once, you can click this icon here. Now, let's just go to that so it's a little bigger. Another important thing that we'll use later is knowing what point codes are associated with which parts of the template. So if I'm curious where my surfacing turns to subgrade, if I want to show that in other views or keep track of what's what, I can hover over that and it's going to tell me, okay, that's RER, so road edge right. Firstly, I can come down to the toe of my fill, hover over that, and that's telling me SSR, so slope stake right. That's going to be the same at any turning point along these. Some of these will have a squiggly line in front of them, and that just means that they're a private point code, but they're still a point code. So that's that. Now, that's kind of the gist, and we'll pull on that information as we go ahead. So let's open this up. So we have our template, and inside the template we have several template components. So the software is set up that we try and make it so the users don't have to go any deeper in the software than the template components to build a cross-section that they like. So that being said, the cross-sections and the template themselves are fairly customizable. So we'll start at the top here and look at the parameters associated with the template itself. There's not much with that. We can toggle whether we're including clearing and stripping. We can set our crown. And we can also say whether we're including things like super elevation. Now, in the components, there's a lot more variables that we can play with here. Just double click this. And here we can see a bunch of variables, things like ACP width, thickness, fill slope, yeah, etc. So a bunch of things we can use to customize there. If the template you're looking at is very close to what you want, but it just doesn't do something, there may be some hidden parameters in here that if you're ambitious, you can turn that on and see a few more advanced options that can let you get you exactly what you want. So for this one, we've got one side of our road has an 11-foot ACP width. Let's just change that to 8. So now our cross-section is no longer symmetrical. So we did a very simple edit there. It's completely reasonable to come in here and just change that. Now, if you changed a bunch of things in that previous one, and you're worried about getting it exactly symmetrical on the other side, the easiest way to go about that is just delete the other side that you haven't customized, hit copy, and paste as right. So that's that. We've got our width set at 8. Now, that's great if you happen to be lucky enough that the geometry you want to design is the same as our default settings, and you only want one template along your alignment. Well, you're set. But chances are you're probably going to want to tweak something or use multiple templates along the alignment. So most of the time when you create an additional template to use, the easiest way to go about it is to copy the template that you want to be based off as a starting point and modify that after. So let's just we hit copy there, we'll just hit paste as new, and we get a complete duplicate of the previous template that we selected. I'm going to go in here, I'm going to change the name, we'll just call it rural W, so rural wide, and we'll come in here, and I'm going to change the same variable as before. I'm just going to make this twice as wide, so 16, and since we're only doing the one variable, I'm just going to change it on the other one too. So we've got something that's twice as wide, we've got a new template. 9 times out of 10, that's the way I'd approach adding a template, and then I'd add whatever components I want in there to get it just the way I want it. For the sake of this webinar though, I'm going to start one from scratch. I'm going to build it using different components, and I'm going to build it wrong. So, and we'll come back and then we'll fix it to kind of display the way things work. So I'm going to come up here, add template. I just want a template, I don't want a component folder. I'm going to call it rural J, so rural for Jersey barrier. And I'll set my crown as per the other one. Now, it's just an empty component. I could pull from different components here, but I want a Jersey barrier. So that's not in any of these default components. I'm going to come over to the eLibrary here, and select all my component folders just so I have everything there and I can expand it and look at it. But what I really care about is this walls barriers one. So that's that. Now, this is where I'm going to start to do things wrong just for the sake of showing it. So I'm going to grab my Jersey barrier and hit copy and bring it up here, paste as new. So it's in our template. I could, usually this is where I'd go in here and change the dimensions to be exactly the way I want. It's all the options are there. But for this sake, it's just illustrative purposes, so it doesn't have to be completely bang on. Copy, paste as right. So I've got 2 in there. Now, I could pull a roadway component from in here, but since I want it to be the same as my rural that I'm starting with, I can pull it from in here. Same with ditches. I'm going to grab a ditch, copy, paste as new left, paste as new right. So that's starting to look pretty wrong. That's good. I'm going to grab my rural up here. I'm going to add that in. Paste as left. Copy. Paste as right. And lastly, let's grab our cut slopes. So this doesn't look very right, and there's a reason for that. So first of all, we've got our Jersey barrier sitting up on top of our strip topo surface, and we've got our ditch attached to our center line. So the reason for that is there's a construction order as far as the software is concerned. So when it's building the different components, it's starting from the top down in the list. So it's building the Jersey barriers. There's a connection set here. So connection for this one is based on the center line. So it's going from the center line, and it's going to be dropped on, in the parameters, there's a barrier offset. So it's going 2 feet out from the barrier and placing it on the merged surface. And since there's no other surface built so far, that merged surface is just the stripped ground. Similarly, the ditch is set to, connection for this one is set to be the outside of subgrade. And since there's no subgrade built, it's going to the outside of the center line, because that's where the subgrade starts. So we can adjust all that pretty quickly just by moving our roadway component up to the top here. So, voila, things look a lot better. We still don't have our jersey barriers in the right place, and we can adjust those by, whoops, wrong parameter. Adjust those by double-clicking, go to the barrier offset, and I want it to be 8 feet from center line because that's the width of my road. Conversely, we could do it a bit fancier. So for this other one, we've got a barrier, what's our base width? 0.8. So we could change the attachment point. Hover over there, so we want EL1R. We can go to connection. We can reference that point code, EL1, and offset minus 0.8. Oh, and since that has a offset in it, set that to 0. There we go. So we've got another template built here that we can use. Guess I want so it's symmetrical. Let's set that to 0 and see. Perfect. So that's great. That's the 3 templates that I'd like to use for this design. I've got my rural wide, and my rural with the jersey barrier. So I'm going to save my table. So this is nice because a lot of the times if you're designing, there's a good chance that you're going to be working on similar projects in the same area, and it's nice to eliminate having to do this every time. So I want to save my rural, I want to save my rural jersey and my rural wide. Okay. Now I come into the default location for my TPL files to be saved. If I was working on a server and wanted to share this with other colleagues, I could save it on the server and just navigate to wherever that is there. For this, also, if it was something that you always wanted to refer back to and have that whenever you open things up, saving over your normal, that's the default TPL file that you'll open when you start a new design. I don't want to change my default settings for this, so I'm just going to call it webinar. All right, so we'll hit save, we'll hit OK. So I could come in to this design and assign those different options here, but we'll make sure I wasn't lying when I said that saving it works on other designs. So I've got my Bluff Road design here. I'm going to go into templates, and I've got 2 options for how I approach this. So I can hit open template or open table. I can navigate to my webinar cross section, hit open, and that just populates just the that makes my list here just have the templates that are in that other file. Now I'm going to cancel out of that, come back in here, and if I want to keep what I have in my list, so my default rural, it's going to ask me if I want to overwrite it, but if I want to keep my urban and resource low volume, so just add to it, I'd use this merge option. So hit merge, grab the TPL file. I can select which ones I want to add in there. So I want to grab all of them. This is asking me whether I want to overwrite the default rural. I do. And there we have. We've kept our urban 1, our resource low volume road, and we have those new templates as well. So let's click OK. So we can assign. So we've got our default rural assigned for the entire road. Let's make it wide until station 180. So assign by range. So dot dot is referring to the start of the alignment regardless of what the first station is. So I want rural wide. I have to hit this add edit. That's really easy to forget. And we'll hit OK. And there we have the road is wider. Now we'll come down here, and where we're really close to this creek, say from station 800 to station, let's go to 960, we want to add a barrier. We can come in here, go station, or we'll grab the template we want. So we want rural Jersey and 800 to 960. Hit add edit. And we have it. Now, this doesn't make sense. We don't really care about having a barrier off the left-hand side of our road where things are fairly benign. So this is a nice example to use or explain why we kept the template symmetrical. So instead of having one template with a barrier on both sides, another template with a barrier on the right, and another template with a barrier on the left, you can capture all those on one template and just using these ranges to left and right. So if I want to change this one to be default, so on the left, I want that to be the default, do that, hit OK, recalculate all, and there we've got our Jersey barrier on the one side and our default template on the other. Now, another issue with what we've made so far is this is a pretty abrupt widening in the road. So there's two options for how we deal with that. We could either not use a different template at all and use our overrides, or we can use a template and use the taper option in here. So if we look in our list, there's no TP here. There are two templates that are always going to be here, even if they're not in your list. So those are the bridge template and the TP taper template. So for this, where I go from my wide road to my normal road, if I want to have that taper occur over 20 meters, I'm going to go from 180 to station 200, and I'm going to apply the taper template. And that is just a linear interpolation based on the point codes to connect the dots. There we have it. That behaves nicely. Now, another handy thing is instead of doing a widening as a specific template, we can also use the overrides. So here we have a bunch of parameters we can play with, and instead of creating a custom template for each section where we want to deviate from that, if it's just one parameter that we want to adjust, well, it makes a lot of sense to do it in here. So let's start with ACP width. And I want to say at station 400, I want to start my taper. At station 420, I want my ACP width to become 30 feet on the left. And if I want to, oops, actually I'm going to duplicate, carry that through to station, let's go all the way to 500. Great. And then lastly, if I want to go back to my default settings with another 20-foot taper, use default. There we have it. Hit OK. And there's our widening. Yeah. The last real thing I wanted to cover is the bridge template. So I don't have a good spot for crossing here, but I can still just describe, use it as a tool to describe what the bridge template does. So assign by range here, I go back to my templates, and we have this bridge template. So it says no cut, no fill. All this is really is an empty template. So it's a gap where you're not showing disturbance area, you're not showing, you're not producing any kind of volume associated with it. Just apply that from station, let's go 200 to 220. So there we have, there's our gap. Yeah, so that's a slick way to use it. The bridge template is useful for things other than just bridges. If you have something where your tin tapers out and you just want to have an alignment going off into space, but you don't want to have your runaway cuts and fills, or extend your line just for the sake of lining things up past where you have a surface, you can use the bridge template just as an empty placeholder. And then the last thing I'll mention, you can also build a bridge template that is a little more visually appealing. So you can have a bunch of different options here, and you can track volumes associated with those if you'd like. But as we can see here, there's no cut or fill underneath of it. And that you just build the same way as we have. So we start with a blank template, dump either side in, and get the dimensions in there the way we'd like. That's what I've got for templates, and let's have a peek at questions. Section. Okay, how do I get this? How should you have creative questions? Gave me one, but so they've got a question about a oh, can I override my template for a culvert, making it wider and deeper? Absolutely. So let's come over here. I've got the culvert window open here. If I add a culvert in here, see what I have for my default settings. So 6 inches, pretty small. Let's change that. But so here we can see the depth of our ditch. If we want to make that wider and deeper, we go into properties. We have a template override option in here. We can change the ditch width to something different. So let's change it to 6 feet, and depth, let's go 3 feet. And template offset is that taper parameter that we were talking about. There, we have that. So we've just adjusted the ditch depth at that one location. What else do we have? Okay. So next one, can I report my volumes by template? Yeah, so here we are. So in our data windows, data options, so we can come in here, we can first choose what volumes we're reporting. So whether we use OptiHaul volumes or general volumes, we use general just for this. And let's look at our cut, fill volumes. And we can look at our different surfacing layers as well. We've got all those in there. Now, this point types, we can control how frequently the values are populated. So if I want to have it at a assigned interval, come in here. I can turn that on to say every 100 feet. We'll do that just for now. Oops. Oh, and I got a funny warning because I have a taper template where I shouldn't. Let's turn that to my default just for the sake of this. And why didn't that update? Oh. So there we have our volumes associated with that. We've got our different surfacing layers. So that's great. We can build on that though. So let's come back here. We can say, I want to only see my volumes where we have the different template assignment range points. That's breaking them up where we have the different templates. And conversely, or make things even a little more complicated, we can come in here and in the materials, we can come in here, layers, and we can say, okay, surface layer 1, I actually want to call that surface layer 7, for example, if you wanted to keep track of things separately. Okay. Yeah, so I think I covered the sharing templates between projects. We have a question about that. So that is just as simple as when you make your templates, save the table, and then where you save it, it's up to you. I saved my previous one in this default directory, but if you were working on a server and wanted to share it with other people in the office or even in other office locations, you could navigate to wherever you want, save it there, and when you go to open that or merge that, you can just do the same thing, navigate to the respective folder. Similarly, if you want to share it via email, just attach the TPL file and navigate to it. And okay. Now what else do we have here? You should try to bring it. So got a question about showing a taper up to a bridge template. So yeah, I got around that by just switching it out. Some of you may have noticed the warning I had there. So you can do the taper a couple different ways with a bridge template. Honestly, for tapers, if you're tapering your road width, 90% of the time I prefer to use my overrides. But if you're coming in here, you could assign a short section of your default template or whatever template you want to use for the transition. You could also use a bridge template that isn't just the empty template. eLibrary, bridges, and get something with an actual point code. Now, in order for your tapers to work out, it's connecting the same point codes. So here, it might make sense to change the code ST1 to RE. I guess we do have an RE in this one though. Yep, it's right there. So that would work regardless. So you just use one of the templates that has your bridge width assigned to it. And we have another question about display shading and features like cut and fill. Can I use it for templates or point codes? Yes, you can, and that's actually jogs my memory. I wanted to show how you can use your point codes to illustrate just the line work, not even getting into the shading. So let's come back here, look at our Jersey barrier option. We'll hover over Jersey barrier, and just all I want is a code that I can use to indicate where it's at. So we have BR3R. Let's come into our plan options, and we want to show a template code in our plan. So that, come in here and BR3R, turn that on. Let's make it something obviously different. We can show that. Show where our barrier is there. Now also in here we have that shading feature that was mentioned in the question. We can turn that on and we can choose how we show things. So by default it's going to show your cut and fill. I'll just turn that on. Now we zoom out and we can get something that's continuous. So that why it looks broken right now, it's driven by the thickness, and it's showing the shading wherever there's a report point. So you can play with your thickness depending on what scale you want to use to make it a more continuous look. With point codes though, or code pairs, you can use shading to show things between your different point codes. So let's use road edge left and road edge right. Hit OK. And let's change the color to, actually we'll change the color here to gray. Use that to hatch our road edge. I have gone a bit over time. There are some remaining questions here, and I will we'll address those individually. Thanks everyone for your time, and as Andy said there, I hope everyone's well and staying safe.
Stay strong. Bye now.